Hey, it's Nobody, and in this video, I'm gonna talk about the V-shaped sound signature. I want to cover what the V-shaped sound signature is, what it sounds like, what music it's good for, and I'm gonna give you some of my favorite recommendations in a bunch of price points. So let's start off by talking about what the V-shape sound signature actually is. So the V letter comes from what the frequency response in a V-shaped sound signature looks like. So the lows and the highs are slightly elevated while the mids are sort of recessed. And that's where the name V-shape comes from. Now, what exactly does a V-shape sound signature sound like? Well, to be honest, V-shapes are kind of on a spectrum, but to give you the simplest answer, it sounds like, oops, I bumped the camera there. It sounds like elevated bass with elevated highs, and that sort of puts an emphasis on drum hits, bass guitars, electric guitars, cymbals, hi-hats, vocals that are higher in range. And so that is the simplest answer. It's sort of a contrasty sound signature. It's highlighting two areas of music to sort of bring across this like emphasized and energetic sound. I hope that makes sense. But to get into the nuance of a V-shaped sound signature, there's actually sort of a spectrum of the V shape. You have IEMs that are more bass focused, and what I have here is the tension oxygen and the moondrop chew 2. And so these are by no means bass head V-shaped sound signatures. You can definitely get more bass head style V-shapes, but I don't have any because I'm not really a bass head. But these are more relaxed V-shapes. So there is an emphasis in the bass and it gives you that warmth, but it's not necessarily, the treble isn't necessarily as emphasized in these sound signatures. And I'll actually put up the graph of the moondrop chew 2 and the tension oxygen, because they're actually pretty similar. Like, obviously the tension oxygen, although I think it's discontinued, it's a more expensive IEM. It's better resolving, has a little bit more bass texture and technicalities. The imaging is pretty good compared to the chew, but just like overall sound signature wise, these two are actually pretty similar. And then you sort of have in the middle here what I would call like a mild V, which is, it does have that emphasis in the bass and the treble, but it's much more closer to neutral. And the IEM I'm talking about is the moondrop Kato. And although it does sort of have this like bass hump that sort of extends into the mid-range, I would say the moondrop Kato is sort of on the edge of being a V shape or a neutral tune, but I would consider it a mild V shape. And so as we go further into the spectrum of bright, we have the Tanjim Hana, which is, I would consider it a bright V shape because it's sort of got that bass emphasis, but it's also got a little bit more of a treble emphasis to it. It's a little bit of a brighter sound than the Kato, and then it just sort of gets brighter and brighter from this point forward. So we got the Truth Air Zero, the original, and not the Truth Air. Actually, it's the 7 Hertz Zero. But yeah, so this one, although the bass emphasis is really mild, like it's just a little bit of a sub bass boost. Yeah, it's a much brighter IEM. And so that kind of contributes to more of a treble emphasis. And the reason I don't consider this like a mid-range tune is more so because it still has that scoop in the upper mid, in the lower mids. So that's something that you're gonna see, and I'm gonna throw up the graph of all of these combined, just because although it's a little busy, what you're gonna see is that V shape, and that's what they all have in common, is that there's a bit of a scoop in the mid-range area. So I'll throw up that graph now so you can see it. And then I want to talk about what music sounds pretty good with a V-shape tune. And usually it's gonna be most of the popular genres. That's why it's the V-shape on it, I would say, in my opinion, is the most common tuning, is because it works good with all the popular genres. You know, rock and roll, rap, EDM, R&B, like it basically name a genre, and the V shape is gonna do pretty well. It might not be the best genre, like the best tune for any of those particular genres, but it's actually going to do a good job of sort of presenting that fun, contrasty sound, which a lot of people enjoy when they're listening to more energetic genres like dance music, EDM, hip-hop. And actually, I've been listening to V-shapes more recently than I usually do. I've kind of moved on to liking more of a mid-range style tuning, but recently I've been listening to a lot of like Charlie XCX, Sophie, just sort of like left field pop artists. I'll throw up a couple albums as well, so some music lovers can have some fun with that. But yeah, now I think I'm just gonna go ahead and recommend some V-shape IEMs that are stuff that I listen to pretty often, and that would be the Moondrop Kato, the Tanchjim Hana OG, the C2, and the Let's Shore, I don't really know how to pronounce that, S12 Pro. So basically what I like about the Kato is it is sort of a mild V-shape, so it's really also not as energetic as these other ones, so it's really smooth, and I enjoy the bass characteristics of the Kato, and it has pretty decent imaging. The reason that I enjoy the Tanchjim Hana is just because it's a little bit, it's like, you know, the opposite of the Kato, where it's a little bit more aggressive, it's a little bit brighter, but there's still that bass, and that is also the reason why I like the S12 Pro, is because it's even more aggressive than the Hana, and the only thing that I don't really enjoy about the S12 is that I did kind of think that the soundstage is a little bit intimate, and I do think as well that the imaging is not as good as it is on the Hana, but I like that synergy that it has with the bass and the treble. And I would say that the Tin Hi-Fi C2, I actually in recent times have enjoyed the C2 more than the Tonshin Hana OG. More so because I found the right air tips for my purposes, because I always thought the treble was a little bit too much, a little bit overcooked. It kind of sort of gave my ears trouble with the S's and the T's. I think they were a little bit too overemphasized, but with the final Type E audio tips, I've attenuated the treble just a tiny bit where it sort of eliminated that problem. But interestingly enough, this is about $40. You can find it for way cheaper. Like, I picked this up for about $25 on AliExpress. And yeah, the imaging is just as good as the Hana, maybe even slightly better. And also the soundstage is wider because it is kind of open. I'm not sure, but I suspect because it has this little vent right here, it gives it a kind of wider soundstage, and so I think this has actually been my favorite V-shape tuning. Also, the bass is really fun. And so the last thing I'm going to talk about, because I don't want this video to be too long, is really what makes a good V-shape is sort of that synergy that this IEM creates. Like, to me, a good V-shape has to have like the bass and the treble working in tandem to sort of create a synergy where it's very energetic and very contrasty sounding and fun. I want to kind of describe it without using just like buzzwords. It's sort of like this relationship that works really good together. It's like a yin and a yang, where it's just it creates this I'm gonna use synergy again because that's the best way I can describe it, between the bass and the treble. And that's personally what I enjoy about like a good V-shape tune, is that yes, it has that bass and treble emphasis, but also what I enjoy about all of these is that the mid-range isn't that recessed. I'm not a huge fan of like a super bassy, or maybe like I don't like when one frequency sort of overshadows another one. I kind of like them to work together. So that's just my video about V-shape tunes. Hope that helps.